So welcome everybody to this fourth installment of our Main Street 101 series, our board member best practices and training. We're so excited to have you here with us, learning from Joy Austin from Main Street America, as well as a couple of awesome experienced board members who will share their insight with you in a little bit. I know that it's lunchtime, so please do feel free to enjoy your lunch during this call. And just as a heads up, we'll send out the recording and the presentation slides afterwards. So do feel free to take notes, but don't feel like you need to. And if you haven't yet, we would love for you to add your name to your Zoom name, update your Zoom name to have your actual name, and introduce yourself in the chat as well. With that, I will pass it on off to Brianne Durham, our Washington Main Street Director.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say a quick thank you for being part of this. I have been a local Main Street director before coming to Washington Main Street about 7 years ago. And I just can't emphasize enough how much it mattered to me to have an engaged board of directors. And just the fact that you are here today taking part in this is just a huge asset to your community. So thank you all for joining us. The only other thing I wanted to say before I pass it over to Joy is that we really want to be supportive of your entire organization, your entire community. So please think of Washington Main Street as a resource to you. I've had a lot of great conversations, light consultations, if you will, with board members over the year. And so I'll be sure to put my direct email address in the chat in just a moment so that you know that you can reach out to me at any point. We do a lot of work with your executive directors because they're staff and they're doing this at least 40 hours a week, right? But your roles as leaders in your organizations are really important too, and we want to be supportive of you as well. So that is just an invitation to reach out if ever you would like to talk about anything that you learned today in this training or anything impacting your local program. And so you know that you are part of the Washington Main Street program and that we're support to you. And you're also part of Main Street America. We're part of this great big world of Main Street that I'm sure Joy will share a little bit more about. And I'm really excited to turn it over to her for this training. Joy is a Senior Program Officer for Economic Vitality at Main Street America. Thank you so much for joining us, Joy.
Yeah, thank you. Well, really good to see such a wonderful group of folks here today. I have met, I think, a few of you in different capacities. I think there was a 101 training before, so you might have seen my face doing that, but we wanted to give you a little bit more insight into, you know, some of the best practices as you kind of are board members and working with your organizations. So today, just kind of going to be doing a little bit of a very brief overview, kind of just ground us all in the same language in terms of like the Main Street approach and what does it actually mean to be on this revitalization journey together. And then go into a little bit of your responsibilities in terms of the board as a group. A little bit of that also as individuals, and then kind of dive in a little bit into these baseline sort of best practices and what that kind of means to your overall organizational framework. So, and then we have a great part of the session will be some Q&A and getting to really kind of talk to some other board members as well, and go through their experiences. Just so you know, for the context, so I've also been a Main Street director in a local community near Chicago, Illinois. It was a suburb, western suburbs of Chicago. And then I also had the great privilege to do some economic development in a city in Adams County, Illinois. And then jumped into sort of a role doing some statewide coordination as well for Illinois. So just kind of wore a lot of different hats like all of us Main Streeters do. So definitely also just want to say the same as what Brianne was saying in terms of that relationship. It's very much a model of collaboration. So you all at the center, and I like to think of these circles around you, your coordinating partner in Washington State Main Street, as well as Main Street America. We're all just around you giving you a big old hug. So whenever you need that support, whenever you need to chat with others that are kind of doing this work, just know that we're there for you. In terms of being a board member, just want to say thank you. I know that it's a really big job to have, and you all, I always consider our board members superheroes, right? You're the ones that are really kind of taking action alongside your executive director and other staff members to really kind of advocate and commit your time and support and sometimes your funds or your connections to funds to really help the organization and what the organization does. The success of your commercial district in the end largely dependent on the board itself and the strength of a board. So we really appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit more about what it is to be on a Main Street board, which to some extent can be a little bit different than maybe another nonprofit that you might have been involved in. And we know how that goes, in your community. You wear one board hat, you probably wear another. So we really do appreciate the time that you spend with your Main Street program and really doing the work of that revitalization of your downtown community. So kind of just diving into that, when we talk about the approach in general, I'm sure you've heard this before. You've got your organization or your outreach team that kind of focuses on raising money, your design, looking at, physical enhancements and improvements to your downtown district, promotion, really looking at marketing, not only your district as a whole, but also the businesses and the properties that are within it, thinking about how you're really kind of branding and creating special events and activities to bring people into your district, and then economic vitality, really looking at business retention and expansion, those recruitment efforts, and how you're really growing your entrepreneurs and building that local wealth. What it really looks like as a whole, economic vitality, we really kind of think about that as creating that sense of vitality, in design, it's really creating that sense of place. When it comes to promotion, again, it's that sense of community, and then organization and outreach, that sense of ownership. So all of these things we really feel are working together and in tandem. You may have different committees that are working separately on different projects, but just know that those committees should also be sort of talking to one another and making sure you kind of know across the work of your organization, what's happening and whether that's at a board meeting specifically where committee members might be telling you what's been going on, or in general that you're getting that report from your director. How are you kind of learning about the different things that are happening throughout the organization? Because as you know, there's a lot of things that you're also wearing a lot of hats sometimes within an organization and your role. So how are you kind of being able to talk to each other and communicate with each other across this? But know that you're really working with each other, not only again with those property and business owners, but then also working with all those sectors of your community, and you're inviting other partners to the table in terms of the work that you're doing for your downtown. So just a couple of slides here, just to be a little bit more specific. Again, design, again, being that thing to really improve the appearance of your district. So thinking about all of those little things when people know that you've really arrived in your district, from lighting and banners all the way to just making yourself feel good about your community in terms of windows being washed and trash receptacles there for people to throw things away. There's all these little things in design that we don't always think about, but those are the things that we think about in terms of Main Street and providing that really good appearance and that really good first look at your community. And then in promotion, again, driving that sense of community, really bringing people to your district and having all those activities, all those wonderful things to kind of foster that type of activity and vibrancy. In economic vitality, really looking at how are you working with your business community, with your property owners, being able to attract those new investors in and developing spaces, whether it be commercial spaces into different maybe retail or restaurants, into also looking at your upper stories and what's going on upstairs, really having an idea of how to really drive that vitality. And then, of course, that sense of ownership, again, really kind of looking at that broad-based community support. So I always like to repeat these things kind of over and over again because it is our approach, and everyone's doing economic development in different ways. But at the same time, this is sort of the language that we really give to our Main Street approach. So kind of diving into a little bit of what it looks like from a board member's point of view in terms of your responsibilities. We sort of start with, understanding that larger picture. This is something that, looking at the governance of your organization itself. How are you leading sort of strategically in terms of your organization? How are you really ensuring that financial stability? And then, of course, how are you supporting the organization and its executive director or other members of your staff? And really just being that ambassador in the end, making sure that you are representing that larger view of the downtown organization, making sure that you're sort of telling folks, all of your different partners, all the wonderful things that are going on, being that supporter, and making sure that you're sort of following all of those different requirements that it takes for your nonprofit organization, depending on how it is you all are organized, because nonprofits can be organized in different ways. But so what are those rules? What are those regulations of the nonprofit? And then how do you really, again, ensure sort of, a healthy structure for your organization? So this is collectively, as the board of directors, sort of, again, that larger view, is really kind of crucial then for the entire community to sort of understand the work that you're doing. So you're going to be establishing these policies and procedures. Sometimes it's around ethics or finances or communications or any type of administrative pieces. You're the one that kind of really looks at sort of some of those legal things like your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, licenses and insurance, those types of things. And then in the end, again, providing that kind of real positive leadership for the program. And being able to make sure that you're sustainable, make sure that you can build capacity by raising any other types of operating or capital funds you might need, and establishing those goals for your downtown district. So just know that, as a group, these are the things to be thinking about collectively together, and possibly reviewed on, say, an annual basis or maybe every other year to kind of just make sure you're kind of understanding what those responsibilities are and how you're supporting your organization and building that culture. And then, just a couple other things to think about in terms of as a group, that type of engagement that you have with this organization. So making sure that you are participating between meetings and other activities, that you're participating in some kind of strategic planning, whether that is, in the short term or what you're going to be doing in that year. Looking at that succession, whether it's staff members or board members, how are you really kind of building on transition? And then really, again, engaging with the full network. So as Brianne was saying, you've got a network across the state, but then you've got a network really, across the United States. So how can we all help each other and know what's going on in different places to kind of keep up with those trends? And then, of course, developing, again, those policies, different types of things in terms of management. And then in the short term, just knowing that you're there to help with any other kinds of retreat or planning. Maybe it is about participating also in a committee, establishing goals, not only for the organization, but also for that committee. And then really just looking at those strategies in general and knowing that you can be flexible because things changed. The way where your organization or your community is 1 year can change as quickly as in a year, or every 2 or 3 years there's new goals and new ways to engage the community and find out how to make your organization the best that it can be, so that it can really support the things that your community is looking to do in terms of growth, and how the Main Street organization can really help and work alongside its partners to really help with the growth of your community as a whole. So thinking about that, we wanted to kind of give a few different things in terms of best practices and for this sort of pathway to really a strong organization. So these things to us, we really feel are very valuable because, it's thinking about your program as maybe operating at some of the highest, keeping some of the highest standards in mind. This isn't something where your program has to do these things or it has to achieve these things. It's just that these are some of those best practices, again, to really kind of elevate your program, provide your organization and your community with just a stronger foundation and framework. It also helps to kind of be able to look at some of these best practices to maybe review your own progress, recognize a lot of the strengths and accomplishments that your organization has, and then kind of understand also, again, trends and any challenges that might be involved as you work on local revitalization. So just to kind of keep this in mind in terms of just best practices, some things to kind of consider as you're working with your organization. So things that we want you to know, we really want you to look at this by, we're meeting you where your community is at, because everybody's in a different part of their journey in general. So these best practices are also just sort of a holistic look. So taking the Main Street approach itself and just kind of digging a little bit deeper into, how are we really measuring our successes? How are we really looking at how we plan? And then, of course, it's an aspiration, let's say, for accreditation, if that is something that your community would like to do. So something to look forward to, if that's something that your community would like to go through, is our national accreditation process. And in terms of that framework, so this is kind of how we're dividing up how we view the work. So the top sort of like who we are as that organization. Main Street is about broad-based community engagement. It's about that inclusive leadership and building capacity. It's about having diversified funding to have the capacity to do the work and creating a sustainable program. And then it's what we do. So we are all about trying to really make sure that we are strategy driven in terms of our programming, that we're not, it's always fun to have different events and activities going on, but making sure also that those events and activities are pretty purposeful, that it's not just the day of an event that is impacting our community, but the things that happen thereafter and bringing people continuously back. We're also preservation based. So, how do we again look at our point in design, for instance, and how we really kind of encourage preservation practices and build economic development through preservation. And then how do we show that impact and how do we celebrate those things? Making sure that we work so hard every year on all of these fantastic programs, but we want to be able to show the impact and then also celebrate the things that we do. So if we took this kind of one by one, fostering that, again, sense of ownership and having that broad-based community commitment to revitalization, again, knowing that it is community-wide. We want to be able to work with our partners. Who are our key partners and how do you collaborate with them? Some questions to ask, how are you engaging your community? What other tools might you be using? And how does the program sort of update your local government? Do you go in front of your city council or your county commissioners and let them know the work that you are doing and showing them how your work aligns with a lot of the different priorities that they may have as well. So just kind of here representing, the different parts of the Roslyn Downtown Association and the different partners, let's say, that can be there. And I just chose this as an example because it was really nice on their website. They had their partners listed right below, so you could kind of see the different groups and organizations that are worked with there in that community. I don't know if that community is here online. And then thinking about inclusive leadership and organizational capacity, what is your volunteer engagement like? Are there any challenges to that? How do you also, as the board, engage, again, also with the organization? And how do perhaps you as board members participate also on committees? You want to make sure that you're able to kind of reach out also to many different folks in your community. I think Main Street organizations are very unique to this because we have so many different avenues that we work in. So it's really about matching also your individual passion. Sometimes I think board members occasionally, if they enter into the Main Street program through an organization, you might have been voluntold to do something. But in the end, I think in Main Street, we can find a lot of different things that we are personally passionate in, and really kind of align things that are near and dear to our hearts with what's going on with the way that we help our communities. So how can we really maintain active board leadership, and again, support that volunteer base, help, develop professional staff, provide them with the support that they need as well. And, again, looking at that organizational structure and how you can be the most effective. So just some things to kind of think about in terms of additional best practices under this inclusive leadership and organizational capacity. Term limits, for instance, on the board. Those types of things are important because it can help recharge your batteries. It helps avoid burnout, for that matter. You can really kind of help strive for this strong board culture of doing, because as you know, Main Street boards are boards that are working boards as well. It can also help to kind of look at and assess your community in general, and maybe there's some demographic changes that are going on. So how do you represent also the demographic changes that are happening? How can you get new talents and new perspectives? Those things can kind of be assisted with if you were to put term limits, let's say, into your culture of developing your board leadership. And then also succession planning, having some kind of plan to know that those that join you as volunteers may then participate in committees, can be chairs, can join the board, but how do you kind of show people that they can participate in your organization and make it a very welcoming organization and have ongoing engagement? Some other things to think about is in succession planning would also be for your executive director, and doing these things honestly when you've got a strong leadership, that it's not something that maybe surprises you when either board members decide that they'd like to step off, or if your executive director decides to move on. How are you kind of engaging in that planning? So I know that Washington Main Street also has a lot of resources. You all have a lovely nonprofit association that also kind of helps with some of these things, but those are just some additional things to think about in terms of some best practices. So just quick lists of different things in terms of that individual responsibility. So really stepping up if you are asked to lead, making sure that you're also kind of communicating some other people that you think might like to get involved, definitely keeping up to date with what's happening in the organization, making sure you're following a lot of those different confidentiality policies, and because there's a lot of things that can happen in terms of business retention or recruitment. And then, just making sure that you're also refraining from making some specific special requests to staff, and assisting basically in those responsibilities. So keeping up individually with these things as an individual board member. And then, of course, making sure you are participating in terms of the board meetings, thinking about serving on a committee or chairing a committee, taking the lead on a specific project. And of course, welcome to attend more statewide programs. We have our also national conference coming up. So it's always good to kind of be able to meet with and talk to other board members as well from across the United States and the network. And in the end, just knowing also that you are, again, those cheerleaders, those advocates, brag about your organization, all the wonderful things that are happening, making sure that you're sort of raising that visibility. A really easy way to do that is being able to tell people what's happening even through social media. So if your organization is posting, make sure that you're sharing those things. And then continue to educate yourself, different, again, trainings and ongoing orientations that are happening. So again, we thank you for participating in things like this, because it's definitely very important to just kind of know, ways that you can support your organization and how to be a strong board member and how to build a strong organization. So moving into really quick funding. So very important piece of what happens within a board. Fundraising is a big part of board responsibilities. It's really not the executive director's role. We should be building the capacity for our executive directors so that they can really truly be the experts and be able to think strategically about what the organization's direction can be and help guide the board. But definitely think about how to maintain a balanced structure when it comes to fundraising and really kind of helping in multiple ways. So this was a great example of showcasing the ways that the organization can be donated to, front and center, support your downtown, or there's ways that you can also develop sponsorship or other kinds of marketing and partnership packages for your small businesses. So lots of different ways to kind of help build that structure. Money and funding, again, just a really important part of like building that healthy nonprofit. So just really kind of thinking about how you as board members also participate in that, how you look at having a strong cash flow for your organization. They recommend about 3 to 6 months of unrestricted operating funds. So just something to kind of, think of for the future. Just some recommendations there again and best practices. I won't go into this too much, but just, in terms of, again, Main Street Board of Directors financial responsibilities, you're the ones that are really also establishing those priorities. And you're really, again, driven by your mission and your vision in terms of that. So a lot of the priorities then kind of detailed out into your work plans can help you really see what the full budget of your organization is. So just know that you're the leaders in that fund development. And then it kind of does trickle down. You're not doing it alone. You do have different committees and other, and of course, staff to help with the implementation, but you're the ones that are really driving that. And these are just some tips in terms of fundraising and maybe some small things that can be done to really kind of help with that. And it can be, again, as little as just personal giving, if that's possible, or again, it's being able to make those connections. So it's great to have a board of directors that has just connections with other members of the community, other organizations that we can tap into. So, how can you really then help with those fundraising activities? In the end, it's also just, again, sharing what it is that your organization is doing and making sure that people know so that it can be an easier ask also for other organizations to give. So in terms of strategy driven, so this is kind of a graphic you may have seen in the past, but we really are looking at the whole revitalization journey. And you'll see again that the 4 points are right at the core of that, but it really does start with that community vision, understanding that you're engaging your community to understand what it is that they would like to see in your downtown or through the organization, really providing also an understanding of your market, and then creating basically those strategies for your downtown. So what are those 1 or 2 different things that are really your strengths and really what makes your community unique that you can really dive into with your work plans? So you just kind of see how this works with the community vision, your market understanding, creating those strategies. From the strategies, then you develop your work plans, and then knowing through your work plans that you're providing some measurable outcomes to, again, be able to see the successes and celebrate those things. So when we talk about that strategy programming, this is really what we mean, is a way to really kind of define that direction and really look at your work very comprehensively. Work plans, just as it's a tool for you. It's really just a way to be able to manage basically the things that you are doing as an organization, but know that work plans can actually also be that fundraising tool. So if people know what it is that you're doing, it's kind of easier to be able to provide that ask. It's very helpful also then for your volunteers. And as you kind of work to recruit more people into the organization, being able to provide that work plan to show people what it is that you're doing, again, can really help with money and people. And in the end, it is a place where you can also put there, again, that measurement and be able to sort of evaluate the work that you are doing. So work plans, we can't stress enough how valuable of a tool a work plan can be as you're developing that strategy. All right. And I know I'm motoring through a lot of this, but I want you all to have a lot of time for discussion as well. So, and know that you are going to receive these slides. So don't panic that, there's a lot of content here. Okay, so then the other piece of your programming in terms of looking at it from that strategic point of view is really being able to provide people with a little bit of knowledge of, again, what it is that you are doing in your organization. So how is your organization potentially using those transformation strategies? Is the strategy that you're working on right now still relevant? Know that those things can change because, again, once you've sort of gone through one part of your journey, know that you're kind of start right back up at the top. So that's kind of why it's that lovely circle graphic, because things never change. It's not a destination, let's say. It is definitely a journey. So a lot of times you want to ask yourself, are my strategies still relevant? Has my community changed, and what can I be working on that might be new, or how can I kind of adjust the work that we're doing to meet the needs of my community as it is right now? So some best practices there would really be, say, an annual review of mission, vision, and a work plan approval process. So as you look at the work that you're doing day in and day out, how are you approving those work plans, and how are you developing, again, either a transformation strategy or a plan of action? Again, the bonus would be if you can put some metrics to that, some measurable outcomes that you want to see, that would be a lovely bonus. So just some things to think about as you're developing that programming. And then when we talk about preservation-based economic development, just really going back to like sort of the heart of Main Street, you really want to think about, have you done maybe some asset mapping? How are you educating your building owners and your businesses on best practices? I know a lot of you have either maybe a facade grant or this one here, a downtown storefront improvement grant, something that really kind of helps your businesses and your property owners really look at preservation ethics, provides them with education. Maybe it's that you have at least design guidelines that can be followed, and other resources so that those businesses and those property owners can really meet those guidelines. Are you maybe just hosting something annually that kind of just talks through any other types of resources that might be available in your community? So just some things to think about in terms of your preservation-based economic development, and how are you really promoting, again, what makes your community very unique, which is a lot of times that the culture and the building stock and the architecture that you have. And then finally, demonstrated impact and results. So again, going back to those metrics and those measurables, and how are you really advocating and telling people about the things that you do? How are you measuring it? Is it just attendance? Is it also the amount of volunteer hours? What are some of those qualitative and quantitative things that you can be telling folks about your story? Are you getting testimonials? When people are at all the wonderful events and activities that you're putting on, so that you can really explain, why your community is a place to be. So just some things, I think that it's a way to really look at how your organization, again, tracks the success. Maybe it's creating an annual report if you have one, how do you really use that annual report over and over again? So you're not just developing a really pretty piece, but are there ways to also continue to tell that story throughout the year? How do you also, how do you share that? So is it something where it's just a printed piece? Is it something that you can also put online? Are you maybe taking those individual pieces of an annual report and continuing to promote promote. You know, just really being able to continuously tell that story over and over again, very helpful tool in terms of being able to demonstrate the impact that you have in your community. In the end, a couple other things for measuring success, those reinvestment statistics that you may collect for Washington Main Street. Again, you can take a lot of those different numbers that are there and create individual stories and highlights so that you can really, again, share what it is that you are doing within your organization. And then it really gives you a way to, again, track some of those things over time. And then it gives you an opportunity to have a conversation about what things have been working real well and maybe what things you might want to consider changing. So all of these things combined can really help, you know, tell the story of the successes that you have and make sure that you can follow some of those best practices. So I know that I'm a tiny bit over time because we want to get into some of our breakout rooms. But that's really kind of, again, I know I whizzed through a ton of information, so happy to answer questions, happy to answer them in the breakout rooms. There'll be more opportunities for us to connect. You've got a great series here in your 101 that's being put on by Washington Main Street. So I just want to thank the state again for providing this opportunity, especially for their board members.
Yes, thank you so much, Joy. We are indeed going to move into some breakout rooms in a moment, but first wanted to put Greg on the spot a little bit for some pre-breakout room questions. So let me add him to our spotlight. Hi, Greg.
Hi.
And I've just got a couple of questions for you. The
Okay.
first one is, what are your best tips for new board members?
I would expect them and hope that they want to be very actively engaged in the organization. It's frustrating when we have people on the board that are there just to be a member of a group. As someone said earlier, as Joy mentioned earlier, the Main Street boards are very active working boards, and you know, find a committee that you have a passion for and dive right in.
Love that. That's such great advice. And then the second one is, what are your favorite parts of being a Main Street board member, and what are the most challenging?
Favorite parts, I'd say, would be the camaraderie among the different board members. It's always great to be working together, accomplishing things. And then I'd say also the appreciation from the community when they recognize that we're making a difference in our downtown. I'm from Kent, and it's great to have the merchants you know, appreciate when you're doing cleanups or you've made a difference with lighting, and also to hear kudos from the city when the mayor and the city council recognize that the money that's being spent for downtown is being spent very well through the Main Street program.
And any specific challenging parts?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to forget the negatives. Well, so I get every community is going to have different challenges. We certainly have some issues with homelessness and vacant buildings, and merchants that maybe, you know, are stressed just keeping their doors open, and so they really don't have time to participate in the activities that our Kent Downtown Partnership is trying to put on. So those can be a challenge, and I think you just have to try and be accepting of what the merchants and the property owners are dealing with, and that they've got their businesses to run. And frankly, I feel like the best thing they can offer a downtown organization is that they're there. They are at least open for business. So to ask them to also participate in the organization sometimes can be a bit much. So I'm just glad they're there.
Totally, that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you sharing those. Now we'll take a little bit more time to learn from each other, hear from each other in a little bit of a candid space. So the first thing I'll do is I'll say goodbye to anyone who's joining us in the future on the recording. We so enjoyed having you, and please feel free to reach out with any questions.